So this piece is entitled No Fear Till Friday, really because ISIS and so-called Islamic State and the terrorist organisations like attacked the Brussels airport terminal, or the entry area there, the atrium, and the, is it Scarbeck or something? The Brussels tube station, train station? Pardon me. The EU vote's coming up on the 23rd of June, Thursday the 23rd of June, 2016, and you may or may not have noticed that no actual atrocity has been carried out in the UK. The Brussels thing happened, and it's since we've had the thing about the EU vote, it's all gone kind of quiet. Now, there are foiled plots being mentioned by the security services, or the government more accurately. They're saying that there are foiled plots. There's a guy bought a big knife, and him and his uncle were online talking about what they were going to do, how they're going to commit some kind of attack. You could buy that sort of big knife in Kilmarnock a few years back, and you know, there was a guy down in some little Kilmarnock indoor market, and they had all sorts of swords. Some Chinese looking guy, or Taiwan or something. I thought it was a bit dodgy, you know, he's kind of beside the lace curtains and opposite the key cutter. Anyone in Kilmarnock will know this. But it could be any of a number of markets in Britain. You could buy that sort of weapon until recently. Now I guess they went on the internet and bought it there, and somebody got wind of it or whatever. And that's billed as a foiled terrorist plot. But I'm saying any significant terrorist atrocity is not now going to happen until Friday the 24th of June 2016. I mentioned this briefly in another piece, but it warrants its own little shot, its little scene, because it's important. It's all tied up with what ISIS, so-called Islamic State, the terrorist people would like us to vote for in the EU vote. You have to take this into account, because you've got to take into account what your enemies would prefer you to do, because you're using then their expertise. And if you don't use their expertise, you're missing out on some expertise. I gave the example before of other situations where this happens, but if ISIS would like us to vote to stay in the EU, their tactic would definitely be to keep quiet and not have a major terrorist atrocity sponsored by them, so-called Islamic State, before the EU vote is over in Britain. They would like us to stay in Europe because we'll share information with the Europeans, some of whom are pretty leaky according to our secret services. And it makes us weaker in their eyes, because we will be forced by the European Union to allow people in who have been rubber stamped, more or less not properly checked, over at Greece and Macedonia, and sent up to Sweden and then Germany. You know, Merkel invited them all in. I've said stuff about that elsewhere. I mean, it's foolish. It's just foolish. And she's not a European leader. She's not the leader of Europe. She's just the leader of Germany. And so maybe we should all have thought a bit before we kind of allowed it. It just kind of happened. It was all so quick. It happened. But so-called Islamic State, ISIS, would like us to vote to stay in the European Union. And like David Cameron, the leader of our government, the Prime Minister in the UK, they don't want anything to rock the boat until after Thursday the 23rd June 2016. Sorry, just looking at a big fat bee there, it's really a beautiful spring now. They want us to vote to stay in, and their way of doing that is not to rock the boat. And that, in other words, they are now, ISIS, so-called Islamic State, are completely aligned with our UK government as to what it is they would prefer the people of the UK to vote for, i.e. stay in the EU situation as is. I've said it before, we really need to completely rewrite the whole way that the European Union works. And I don't mind some of it having the same euro coinage or whatever currency, but the thing about security and the thing about us paying out loads of money to to subsidise the poor countries like Poland, sending tax credits back to Polish people's homes just because they work here for a bit. That's costing us an absolute fortune. That was never agreed in the agreement. It's kind of like a consequence of rule after rule after rule being rolled out, and then suddenly we find ourselves in a position where more in tax credits is going to Eastern Europe than we actually spend on our own people in tax credits. Now, how's that grab you? So, back to my point. So-called Islamic State definitely want us to stay in the European Union because they believe that Britain is weakened by it, and they think that we'll eventually fully lose control of our borders. And when that day comes, it'll be joyous, because that'll be then business as usual in Britain, as well as over there in Brussels or wherever they want to be in Europe. So we're the brick house. I talked about 3 little pigs at one time, you know, the straw house, the wooden house and the brick house. Britain is the brick house of Europe. We stand slightly apart by luck, geography, and by currency, so we're not open to the counterfeit problems of the euro being counterfeit. The euro and the dollar are the 2 most counterfeited currencies in the world. And recently they blew some places up in Syria that were doing counterfeiting factories. You know, they were counterfeiting factories. And they found these euros and dollars there. So I'm afraid that if you vote to stay in the European Union, please bear in mind, no matter what other arguments are brought forward, you are voting the way that our enemy, our terrorist enemy, would like you to vote. Now, I understand that everyone's going to vote with their wallet and say, oh, I've got a pension, and someone says my pension money is invested somewhere in Europe, in Stuttgart, or in the exchange over there or something. Okay, there's all those things to think about. I'm just saying on a security basis, the enemy would like us to vote to stay in Europe. And it's proving that by virtue of the fact no atrocities will be committed between now and Friday the 24th of June 2016. And the government showing that it knows that by bringing out foiled plots, news of foiled plots, like guys buying a big knife. If someone's stupid enough to talk online and stupid enough to buy a great big knife online and then talk about online having a terrorist plot to hurt Americans or something in Britain. Obama's visiting today. It's the Queen's birthday today, 21st April. Obama's visiting today. It's all very well for people like him to say what he's going to say, but he's not paying the 20 billion tax credits to Eastern Europeans, and he's not the one who, if we choose to stay in Europe, as he may kind of hint that it'd be better, he's not the one who'll get blown up because we have a weakened security setup or borders that we are forced to trash because the Franco-German alliance says you gotta. It's quickly turning into a German-German alliance, unfortunately, as somebody pointed out. I think it's Nick Robinson on one of his programs pointing that out. So, no fear till Friday. Thanks for watching and listening.